Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to share some tips for all those people who have fallen into distance learning thanks to the wonderful thing that's spreading around the world right now. And basically, everybody's quarantined and are needing to teach their children themselves, except not quite because it's distance learning. And so the schools are sort of, you're in this strange situation, but trying to teach your kids at home. It's not really homeschooling, it's distance learning. And so their public schools are still there, but it's a difficult transition and situation to be in. So I'm a homeschool mom. You can see my youngest, but my oldest is 5 years old, and I've been homeschooling her for about a year. And I have some encouragement for you guys and some tips as well to really help your kids thrive in this time so that they can, if there is school in the fall, that they can hit the ground running and learn what they need to learn, but then also to figure out like what are you going to do if schools aren't there in the fall, and some ideas on that. My channel isn't normally a homeschool channel. It is more of a biblical femininity and relationships channel, talking more about highlighting some of the feminist ideologies that are out there and how that is having negative consequences in our lives and our families and for women. However, I want to talk about homeschool because it's just, I believe, very relevant right now. So if you want to learn more about those things, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you like this video, go ahead and like it so that will help it get more traction so more people can see this. Okay, so the beginning of my encouragement is going to be a bit of validation for you guys. So first, I want to just acknowledge this is a tough situation to be in. This is a tough situation even for people already who are homeschooling, because homeschooling is not being at home constantly. It involves actually going out in the world, and you have excursions, and that helps kids just be happier in general and easier to manage. But that's not there. But then if you're somebody who's not even used to this, that's hard. And then it's hard if you also are trying to work from home, or if you're dealing with money problems as well. Or, there's a million different reasons why this is even more challenging, like way more challenging than just if you had said, hey, I want to homeschool my kid. And it's very different than what a normal homeschool situation would be. This is difficult because you're starting in the middle of the year. If schools end up, not being open in the fall, or they open and then shut down again in the fall, like it would be easier if you just started the year at least, but you're also in the middle of the semester, pretty close to spring break, when kids were already trying to check out. So that makes it really difficult. And it's difficult if you're working with teachers, and that you're not really in control, versus if you had just kind of thought, hey, I maybe want to homeschool, then you look into it and then you make a voluntary choice. No, people have been thrust into this. And so I just want to acknowledge that and validate that and say, it's not unusual or surprising, or it's not some kind of statement about your ability to help teach your kids if you're having a hard time with this. This is a difficult situation to deal with. So first, I just wanted to acknowledge those things. And now I want to give you some other just encouragement that's not just saying, oh yeah, this is hard, but saying, okay, first off, let's have some perspective. Or I want to encourage you to have perspective. It's not as hard for me because I've already been homeschooling, but for you, I feel like what can happen is there can be, especially from the school system, there might be a lot of like this pressure of saying, oh my gosh, if your kid misses any school, like they're going to be so behind. I mean, you can even see this with a lot of times schools say, no, you can't, you can only take so many days off if you have a vacation or something's happening, and if you don't, like your kid is going to be behind. You need every single one of those school days in order for your kid to not be a totally uneducated, unuseful person who can't make any money in their future. They have no future if they don't keep up with the schedule. And I just want to encourage you to have some perspective that that's not true. I mean, if you have somebody who's was about to graduate, that is a difficult situation. You might try to find some videos specifically about that situation. And I wonder what they'll do. But especially if you have a younger kid, especially if it's like pre-K or kindergarten, I mean, they have years and years to figure out the things that they need to know in order to be a intelligent and educated enough person to make money and provide value in this world. So sometimes from what I see and what I've seen people say on Facebook and whatever, there's just a lot of pressure of like, you have to do this, you need to do that, you need to, they need to be doing their music, they need to be doing their this, they need to be doing their that. If they haven't learned this by that time, like the whole system's going to fall apart. But I would say, okay, breathe, right? Like there's no way that if a kid is out for a couple months that they just have no possible way of catching up. Okay, so just have that perspective. But I'm going to share some tips that I believe will help kids actually get so much further, so much faster than schools really can do. I also want to encourage you that you can do this, right? So you are a functioning adult, and the goal here is to raise kids up to be functioning adults, right? And so you can do this, especially for the younger stuff. You know the alphabet. You can help teach your kid the alphabet, right? And there are so many resources. I encourage you to model resourcefulness for your children. There's so much on Pinterest. There's so much on YouTube teaching things. There's so many animated videos that honestly, especially, I don't know about older kids, but for younger kids, that really help teach them some stuff. So use those resources. So it doesn't mean you as you are have to have full ability, but you have the capability of learning how to do this stuff. There's nothing about a school teacher that is like God ordained. They're the only people who are capable of educating kids. You can learn too, and you already know a lot of the information, or you should, or if you don't, that might say something about the public school system that maybe people don't really learn, or maybe what they're learning is not really that important as in real life. I'm trying to encourage you in that you can do this. And I also want to encourage you in finding some silver linings and finding some benefits of this. So one benefit would be to understand your child's experience better, right? Because, you're not at school, you don't go through school, so you don't know what it's like. But now you get to really get a whole lot more insight into what their day is like and what they're dealing with, and I would kind of encourage you to think, is this a good thing? But obviously, I'm so biased towards homeschooling because, I am a homeschooler, but this could be a chance for you to at least be able to empathize when they say certain things or when they're sick of school or complaining about something or feeling a lot of pressure, and you can maybe find ways to help alleviate those things. And also, you get to know what they're teaching. This might be a little bit more relevant for older students. There could be some things that might be a little alarming. But then also for younger students, if you know exactly what they're learning, it will help you to incorporate it into the day and to just help them make better progress on that. Also, it can help you understand your own child and just their learning style. It will give you opportunities to really focus on their character, because that's what a lot of this is about, right? Like you want to educate them, you want to teach them how to learn so they always can learn. Learning to learn is the most important educational skill you can have. And also I would argue resourcefulness and also just diligence. And these are things that you can shift the focus from you need to learn this math problem to the character behind it, and that will help them go exponentially further. So you'll have that opportunity to do that, and you'll get to understand your child and even learn what kind of learner are they? What things are they struggling with? Mentally, what things are they struggling with? You'll have the opportunity to be the person that helps them get through that, and you'll increase your influence with your child. Because as parents, like our role is to have that influence and to raise them up. And so when you are the primary influencer, you'll get to influence them more so in the way that you want to be influenced. Or you want them to be influenced, and what you can focus on, especially once you get out of kind of like emergency, let's just learn how to do something with this mode, you could maybe start thinking of, okay, you know what, where are the gaps? What things is my kid not learning that actually I think are really important? And then adding that in slowly supplementing with just, sometimes even one day a month or whatever to just bring something up. You're like, oh, hey, you know what? Come over here. I want to teach you something important, right? Okay. And also, and this is what I'm really going to get into in a moment, is helping your kids get results and to not just fall into that busy work trap. Because a kid can listen to a lecture all day or just like go through something. But I'll get more into the details. But what the goal really is to for them to learn how to read or for them to learn how to do division or whatever. And it's not for them to just be able to say that they went through the curriculum. You know what I mean? And so anyway, you'll get to really help them get those results. And then if they're at a sticking point, you can give them that one-on-one attention to help them get past that. And so this is a really good opportunity for that. So I'm going to make a follow-up video about really getting kind of nitty-gritty on this, but some of this may just sound sort of broad and you might not know how to implement it, but know that that is coming. And I wanted, before I share my tips, I want to acknowledge that I do not have an education major. And so this is not based off of, a bunch of studies or this or that. This is really based off of my just thinking about how do I learn and applying that to my own child. And I really do believe a lot of this is intuitive and common sense if you really think about it. Like, of course, if you do it this way, somebody would get better results. But at the same time, it's not necessarily always implemented, or if you go talk to a teacher, they might not talk about this stuff so much. So I just want to acknowledge, like, if you're somebody who's like, okay, unless somebody has a PhD in something, like they don't know what they're talking about, maybe this video won't even be too helpful for you. But if you're somebody who's much more results oriented, then I would encourage you to listen to these tips. And I'm just going to, not to brag, but I am just going to kind of point out maybe my credibility in this, in that my 5-year-old is beginning to learn multiplication, division, reading 4-digit numbers, adding 3-digit numbers, like even when you have to carry over the 10 and regroup and all of that. She can read Dr. Seuss books. I mean, she's really doing well. So I'm talking as somebody whose child is, who's teaching philosophy is working very effectively. Also, my dad is a doctor. He taught me some of these concepts of learning how to learn. I know not many people even knew them. My mom was one of those people, and he taught her how to learn and how to study, and then her grades got much better after she met my dad because of this. And so it's sort of common sense, but yet it's not really utilized. I do want to acknowledge that if you are somebody who's distance learning and not necessarily homeschooling, this might be a little bit harder to directly do, since you are going to have the specific assignments probably from the teachers and whatever. But what I'd suggest and encourage you to do is to try to see how much, in what ways you can utilize this, and then kind of compare how much your kid is learning when you try to do one thing versus the other. So the first tip is to identify the real goal, right? Like, what is the objective of what they should come out learning versus your goal is just to finish the assignment. Another tip would be to foreshadow things. This is sort of my own tip, but I think is really helpful to sometimes just mention something that will be coming down. And so then they kind of know and they kind of are aware, okay, this is coming up. This was actually used in bar blend. If you do that workout on Beachbody, and she'd do this where every now and then she would do a move and just kind of show you like, okay, next week we're going to do it this way. Let's just try. Let's just explore. And next week we'll work on it more. And sometimes I do this with my daughter and that kind of test to see, can they learn more? Can they learn the next step? But then it also helps people to just not be so startled almost when they are like, oh, wait, whoa, we're going to do that. But they just kind of, it's just sort of foreshadowing what's to come, because everything should be building on each other. But that's why you want to know where you're going with all of this. Another tip is to use active learning and teaching. And so what I mean by this is basically asking a lot of questions and having it be very engaging. And when I'm saying active teaching, I'm meaning you are very engaged in trying to figure out the right level of difficulty. So it's not too easy and it's not too hard. And you're seeing what is working and what is not working, or specifically what aspect of what you're trying to teach just is not quite clicking with them. And so there's a lot of adjustments and individual adjustments. And that's something that you have an opportunity opportunity to do when you are teaching your child one-on-one. And with asking them questions and having them answer, not just watch something and then say, okay, we finished, but say, okay, well, what did you learn? And then asking those specific questions. So I will get more into some examples of this, but I want to point out also, you might need to hide some answers sometimes, or you might need to be very picky about what materials you might grab, even just little things from Target or whatever. A lot of times they kind of show the answers. Like there'll be flashcards for reading words, but they'll have a picture of the thing. So it could have a picture of a boat and then say boat. And then you're like, what is this word? I mean, they recognize the picture. They're not reading the word, right? So be so aware of that, because just because you bought it from some learning company doesn't mean it automatically means your child is going to learn. You got to make sure that they are having to use their brain and activate their brain to figure it out. And you have to call them on it and prevent them from finding shortcuts to make sure that they are learning. Related to being actively involved and focused, I want to encourage you that you don't have to take a long time to teach them, especially if we're talking about pre-K and kindergarten. I mentioned some of the things my child is able to do, and we do basically like 2 sessions a day usually that are like 15 to 25 minutes each session. I do not have her do it if she is not focused. If she is distracted, if she is hungry, if she is whatever, I make sure that she is fed. If she's just being really unfocused, I can just tell she's just super bouncy. I'm like, you know what? We'll do it later. And then when she's ready to learn, we do it. But we do get to it because she doesn't get screen time until she does her homeschool session. And then she gets some screen time, and then we kind of repeat a pattern. So you have to, if they end up not doing it, you have to then take something away until they discipline themselves enough to be more focused, because they're not going to learn if they're not focused. Think about that with yourself. When you went to classes, and if you were sitting there and you're bored or you're tired and you're falling asleep and staring out the window, what the heck did you learn? Almost nothing, next to nothing, versus if you're engaged. And see, like, I was nerdy and also lazy. I didn't want to spend time at home learning. So I'd be like, I want to learn while I'm in school. So I'm going to participate. I'm going to raise my hand. But if I didn't raise my hand, or if I kind of felt like I was raising my hand too much, I could tell I wasn't learning nearly as fast. It's the same thing with your kids. But right now you have the opportunity that they can't sit in the back of the class and just fall asleep. They have to participate. They have to be engaged, and don't let them finish if they're not focused, and then they get their privileges taken away until they discipline themselves to focus. Another tip is to not teach them what they already know, right? So, and this sounds really obvious maybe, but an example could be even with little flashcards. Like I had little flashcards for addition problems. But then once my daughter learned a number plus 0 equals that same number, I didn't need to keep asking her that 10,000 times. So what I do is I say, oh, that one's too easy. We're going to get a different one. And she kind of got used to that. And she'd always find that kind of fun to be like, oh, that's too easy. Yeah, because it's a waste of time. And this is one of the things my mom said she did the most until dating my dad. And then she learned, oh, right. And it's a natural thing to do. We want to revalidate that we know something. So if your kid's getting frustrated, you can throw them an easy ball, right? Like just if they just did some tough things, that could be a time to utilize some of the easy things to build up their confidence. And that's what I'm talking about. Active teaching is finding those moments of okay, they're low on confidence right now. They need to do some easier things versus, okay, we need to make some progress. Like, let's go. Let's move to the next thing. We need to do something a bit harder. And it's this constant balance. But when you're dealing with one child, or you might have multiple children, but when you're working with one child at one time, you can do that. And that will produce infinitely better results. Another tip is to combine subjects. So something that we like to do is use a dry board, erase board, and then maybe do the math problems. And then she has to write the answers. Or sometimes she even makes up the problem. And so then she's having to write the math problem. So we're using both math and writing. combined, because in life, right, we need to combine our skills. We don't do everything in this separate box. And my last tip is to incorporate learning just into your everyday life. So you might watch some unschooling videos because that's what they're really about. I personally don't consider myself an unschooler in that we do have focused school sessions, like I mentioned, like 2 a day. It's not a lot of time, and it's just kind of a part of our day, and it helps keep her off the TV all day since she has to do something that sometimes she procrastinates. So anyway, so we do it honestly almost like 7 days a week. We don't really have spring break. We don't really have summer break, but if things get busy, we just don't do it, and it's not a big deal. And that's how we do that. But anyway, if you incorporate learning throughout the day, that really helps solidify it, because you want kids to be, as they grow up, this information, if it's so important to be a functional adult, they should be able to recall it when they're not in their like school mode, right? So an example would be, my daughter likes playing Ninjago, the little Lego game on Xbox. And then one time she's like, Mom, how many points do I have? And I was like, you tell me. That's another trick. Flip the question. You tell me. If they can figure it out themselves, make them figure it out themselves. You tell me, how many points do you have? And it was a 4-digit number, and that's something that she's working on. So she had to kind of work through that. But that helped ingrain that in her mind and how to do that. And she's seeing the importance of it because she's seeing it pop up in everyday life. So the more that you can incorporate it throughout the day, the better. Or same thing with letter recognition. Like my shirt has letters. I mean, this is kind of tricky. It's cursive. But for my younger daughter, I mean, she's learning colors. I mean, she's 2. So throughout the day, not just during school, I should say, what color is this? Point to something blue or whatever. And that just really, really helps, because repetition really helps, but also throughout time. I mean, think about it. If you learn a subject and then the end of the semester happens and you never come back to it, what happens? You forget everything, right? Or most everything. But if every month somebody keeps asking you random questions about it, you're going to remember so much more. And it's signaling to your brain, oh, this is actually important information I need to store and I need to keep inside my brain. And we need to be able to recall this. So we're not going to delete this information. We're going to be able to recall it. So that's, I believe, one of the reasons why you need to do that. And just think about it in your own life and in your own learning, and think about all of these things I just said, and how when you do these things, how much better do you learn? When you don't do these things, how well do you learn, right? Kids are a lot like us. And then, of course, another tip would be to try to play towards their learning style. I believe there's a lot more people who talk about that specific tip, so I'm not going to get into it, but that would be another tip to think, are you visual? Are you more auditorial or whatever? Auditory. So I'll try to kind of wrap this up. Distance learning, personally, I believe would be a lot harder. So I really feel for all the people out there who are trying to do distance learning. It might not be quite as, the things that I said might not be quite as effective, in that you might not be able to implement them as fully as you could if you had full control over the situations. But like I said, I'd really encourage you to, maybe even outside of the assignments, if you know what the kid is trying to learn, maybe try your own thing. Try to ask them some questions. Try to think, how could they learn this, and try it yourself, not necessarily what the teacher's saying, and see how that goes, right? Like, just kind of explore, and also bring in that mentality of like, we're just exploring, we're just learning, we're seeing what you're able to do, almost like a show-off session. Like, what can you do? Let's see what you can do. That makes it more fun. That's just another tip. But you can try these things in however small increments that you can, and try to incorporate that stuff into the given assignments that you have as much as you can. And maybe I don't know how much control you have. I mean, it could make sense. I saw some rant from some Italian mom talking about this, where she's like saying the music teacher's sending over musical scores, and she's like, I don't have an instrument. What do you think I'm going to do? You might see what options you have of saying sorry, like just almost saying like we're not going to do music lessons right now, we're just going to focus on like math and English or whatever language, and language arts, and figure out how to read and write and the really foundational basics. Like we cannot be doing everything right now in the middle of this crisis. I don't know. I might be super pessimistic about this situation that's going on in the world right now in 2020, but I really question what's going to happen in the fall. And with schools, it could be an idea. It could be easier to you. I would argue that it would be infinitely easier to consider homeschooling in the fall and to say, okay, for next year, that is just what I'm going to do because this is a mess to try to play tug of war with the teacher and whatever. I just am going to figure out what they need to learn before fall of that following year. That could be an idea. That could be easier. I would personally think that'd be way easier. But of course, I have already wrapped my mind around homeschooling, but I'd encourage you to maybe watch some videos to see if that might be something you'd want to do, considering we pretty much know this will probably come back in the fall. It could be a real mess if you start school in the fall and then it closes again and then you're stuck again. It's just this, I just so feel for distance learners because it is a strange combination of not really fully getting the benefits of homeschooling but still having a lot of the difficulties of homeschooling, but then kind of not having control. It's a strange combination, I think, that might get the worst of all worlds, in my opinion. It's like if they're going to school, you can kind of set it and forget it and they're taking care of it. But then if you get in it, it might be almost easier to just say, forget that. Of course, you want your kid to learn. So then the other thing would be homeschool. But actually, there is something else that is more of an in-between that I believe could be really a good choice given our current situation. And that would be called, this is in the United States, but there are charter schools called EPIC. And I know it's in the state of Oklahoma, EPIC Charter School. And basically you do have one teacher who helps support you. But you have a lot of freedom over how they're learning, and the teacher kind of helps guide what you're learning. I am currently not enrolled, so I couldn't even make a full video about this, but I think I am going to enroll at some point because anyway, especially in my state, you have a ton of freedom, but then you just have that extra support. And then also they offer a learning fund that I think is like $1,200 a school year that can help pay for a lot of the supplies and things. They have different rules about what you can spend it on, but that can really help to have that and to still have that support. But then it can be from home. I mean, normally the teacher would actually drive to your house and you would have a full session. But if you have a one-on-one teaching session, virtual session, that would be much more effective than what all's going on right now. And you can get really a lot more advantages of homeschool, a lot more advantages of taking control of the curriculum and how your child's learning, what they're learning. I mean, there's those basic things that everybody would want their kid to learn. Like everybody wants their kid knowing how to read, but you can do it more your way that makes more sense to you, which will make it much easier for you to implement. So I would encourage maybe looking into considering actually just homeschooling or doing something more creative like a charter school like EPIC. Leave comments with questions that you have. I do plan on making a follow-up video. Maybe actually leave comments if you're interested in that. I got a little more nitty-gritty than I had intended to, giving examples, but I could give a lot more examples of what it looks like for a preschooler. Or not really preschooler. She's starting to learn some first and second grade things even, but I don't know. We'll call her first grade academically. But also we've gone through kind of some of that pre-K kind of stuff. So anyway, I could give a lot more nitty-gritty details on that if you guys are interested in that. So anyway, peace and health to you all. I pray for healing and for peace and really more so than ever, pray that the word of Jesus gets out there, guys, because there is spiritual warfare going on. There are forces of evil and forces of good. And we internally, our biggest problem of humanity is not the virus. It is sin and our separation from from God, right? And so Jesus is here. I guess I'll just randomly share the gospel, but that is our biggest problem. And so more than your child's education or anything else, salvation and eternity and figuring out the truth. Like, Christianity is not about religion. It is about finding the truth. And so what is the truth about Jesus? Did he exist? Which is actually an obvious yes. It's really not logical to believe that he physically did not ever exist. He existed and was claimed to do miracles that people could not find an explanation for, and then claimed to have risen from the dead, and people died gruesome, awful deaths and suffered severe persecution defending that he is Christ the Messiah who came to save us from our sins and was resurrected. That is a huge claim. So I would just encourage people to investigate that claim, because really, more than your child staying up on their learning how to draw successfully, salvation is what matters the most, especially in a time of crisis. Well, I mean, always, because everybody will eventually die, but especially in this time of crisis, that this could be an opportunity to explore that, and to also incorporate, for the existing Christians, like really incorporate some spiritual things into their intentional learning time. And so if you guys have tips on doing that, I actually could use some tips. I'm honestly much better at teaching academic things. Yeah, so there's my random gospel message of this homeschool video, and I will talk to you all later. Oh yeah, like and subscribe to this video if you want more of this kind of stuff, and to just help the YouTube algorithm, help this get out there. That would be fantastic. Share it with people that you think could benefit from it. All right, have a good day. Bye.